We move away from Berlin and head to the UK for the final race day in Season 11. It's the XL Centre in London. And the green flag is out for the final practice session of the season. So let's go and join your commentary team of the Formula E World Feed.
This track, there's so much action that happens here. When you're overtaking, you have the risk. I'm going to listen to his radio now.
Yeah, so this is in the race yesterday. Here we go.
The world's got them relatively behind.
So he's stuck here behind David Beckman at the moment. You've got Oliver Rowland who was chasing him down.
Yeah, right, understood. Yeah, this one's on us. We got it wrong. We've understood that. We'll review it tonight. We'll make sure we don't get it wrong again tomorrow. We're sorry.
There's just not much you can say in those situations, is it, from the team side?
Okay, right, that's
Don't speak, mate. Don't speak. Don't speak. It's fine. It's fine.
Yeah, that's the hallmark there of a pretty cheesed-off racing driver.
Which is not surprising, considering, like Katie said, he's had mixed memories around this place. He's had pole positions, which he secured, obviously another one yesterday, but then he's not been able to convert that into a race victory, and he sees his teammate, of all people, end up on the top step of the podium. So for Mitch, there'll be frustrations, because he certainly did the job that he needed to do in qualifying, but he just wasn't able to capitalise with good strategy in the race.
Yeah, disappointing end to the day for Mitch Evans. As you say, all he can do is take the lessons from it and learn. On the other side of the garage, though, this man here, Nick Cassidy, I mean, he's out of Jaguar at the end of this weekend. Likewise, the team principal, James Barkley, and he's doing a good job of leaving on a high.
Yeah, I mean, Jaguar in general have finished this season on a high so far, haven't they? They've been so consistent, winning a lot of the races recently. Nick Cassidy won the second race last time out in Berlin from, I believe it was 20th on the grid. So, I mean, remarkable, honestly. I think it's the lowest grid position other than his teammate Mitch Evans, who won in Sao Paulo from last on the grid. So it just goes to show that the team really can win from all over the place.
No doubt. Let's catch up then with team principal James Barkley.
James Barkley, I imagine yesterday a bit of mixed emotions. On one side of the garage, you've got celebrations of Nick Cassidy winning the race, and Mitch Evans very, very frustrated on the team radio with strategy.
Yeah, I mean, first things first. Yeah, really frustrating for Mitch and the team. You know, when you get pole and you don't get that result. But this is Formula E. It's incredibly complex. And listen, the team do a fantastic job. We've won 4 out of the last 5 races due to great driving and great strategy calls. So. You win together, you lose together is the age-old phrase, but it is true. And although it's frustrating in the moment, the statistics speak for themselves. It's a team that gets it right more than it gets it wrong, but it doesn't mean it's less painful. And a fantastic win for Nick. You know, again, very, very composed drive from him. The team made the strategy calls really right. In some ways, it was easier not to lead yesterday. In some of these races, it's harder to lead. You saw that with Porsche in Berlin, and that's sometimes misunderstood. Leading is awesome, getting pole is awesome, but you have to be really smart as to how you use it, and you're the first sometimes that gets exposed to how the race strategy is playing out. So yeah, but 4 out of the last 5 races, that's a pretty incredible record. We've really turned this season around, and I'm really proud of the team. You know, we have always shown great resilience, and we love to fight right until the last race.
Speaking personally for you quickly as well, this marks your last day, your last race day as Jaguar TCS principal. How are you feeling?
Very proud, very proud. It's been an incredible journey. The team and I have been through so much together. It's been fantastic times, and this is arguably Jaguar's most successful ever race program at World Championship level, and for that I can only be proud, and we have many, many great memories, and hopefully one is a final memory today.
One more chapter to write. Thanks, James.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you to James Barkley. Thank you to Saunders there down in pit lane. I have to say, on a personal level, it will be a huge shame to see the departure of James Barkley from this paddock. A wonderful human being, fantastic communicator and orator and ambassador for the Jaguar TCS racing team. He's been at the helm since the start of their Formula E journey back in 2016, and it'll be a big loss in the paddock.
Yeah, massive loss, and yeah, like you say, he's a man who's obviously got a lot of pressure on his shoulders, being the team principal of a team like Jaguar, but equally, he's got time for everyone in the paddock, and I think, you know, that sort of sense of community, the sense that you can go up and approach James at any given point in time, no matter if they've had a good race, a bad race, you can get a straight answer, is a real credit to him as an individual.
Yeah, no doubt about it. So you can see we're just under 7 minutes into this session. So pretty early stages at the moment. Where were we in terms of free practice yesterday morning, lap times wise? 1:07.5 was the quickest time set. We're down in the 1:09s at the moment. So it's still a fair way to go until we get to that pace. But of course, drivers at this early stage focusing on 300 kilowatts.
Yeah, no 350 kilowatts at the sharp end of the field yet. We have got a few drivers that have gone through attack mode and gone into that 350 kilowatt mode, but they haven't actually set lap times on it yet. So there's still a bit of warming up to do, it's fair to say, with all the drivers out there.
Yeah, no doubt about it. One thing I found really interesting in the race yesterday, Katie, was the difference in strategy between Nick Cassidy and Nick de Vries. We saw Nick de Vries going for attack mode before he'd gone in for his pit boost stop, and basically using that early to get track position, cycle through, build up a gap and so on. Then he went in for his pit boost. On the other side, we saw Nick Cassidy saving, conserving energy, really sort of, you know, not driving within his limits, as it were. Then he went in for his pit boost stop, and then he had 2 attack modes left to use at the end of the race, which he was able to build out a gap. If it wasn't for the safety cars that he had, he could have probably won by 6 or 7 seconds.
Yeah, exactly, but there was a moment when he didn't take one of his attack modes in a place that would bring him out in front of Nick de Vries, and he had to pass him on track with attack mode, which I know we were talking in the commentary box, would you have done it the other way around to try and get track position before that merge and then have the clean air out the front? But I actually found it very interesting what James Barkley was just saying in that interview, that it's a lot harder to lead races than you expect it to be. He was talking about Porsche in Berlin as well, and how Pascal obviously just overspent energy and ended up cycling right to the back of the field, as we see Maserati straight on testing the limits. Well, that's what practice is for.
Oh, and into the barrier down at the first corner as well. So it's interesting because they've added a runoff area down there, but you can see it's very shiny painted concrete, so clearly went for an armful of lock and got a face full of barrier instead.
Yeah, I guess so, Tom. I mean, that's one way of putting it. It was weird, though, because he locked both the fronts there immediately on braking, so something potentially with the motors to be looking at.
Yeah, not ideal at all there for Stoffel Van Dorn. He is still back out on track at the moment, so a good opportunity for him to try and turn things around. See how Van Dorn gets on. On the other side of the Maserati garage, only one driver that's not been able to get out on track so far is Jake Hughes. Now, if you remember yesterday, he had a dog's day at the office, had contact with Van Dorn. They went sort of side by side, broke what we think was a steering arm or a track rod end or something along the lines of that, just coming through this corner here. It removed him from the race on the opening lap, and unfortunately for Jake, I mean, both Maseratis qualified pretty well yesterday. There was a great opportunity there for the taking, which didn't materialise.
It looked like they were working on the rear of the car, though, for Jake, and if he's not going out on track, I don't know why that wouldn't have been done already. I can understand if he's gone out and something's not fixed, but why is that? Why are they just doing that now?
I wonder if they found an issue when they've gone to fire the car up ahead of FP3 this morning.
You normally test that before practice starts, I think.
Yeah, maybe one of those electrical gremlins that goes in.
It is a good point you made, though, Tom, about yesterday's race. The fact that Van Dorn and Jake were both starting on the 4th row in 7th and 8th place. Like, with the strategy that we were seeing yesterday, it would have been good for Maserati to potentially have the 2 cars line astern out there on track, being able to use each other to open up gaps for attack mode usage and stuff like that. But they didn't get that opportunity because obviously Jake's race came undone on that first lap.
Yeah, Van Dorn was eventually classified in 4th place, so not a bad result by any stretch of the imagination for the Belgian driver. But given, as we said, you know, Jake Hughes' position on the grid, you would have expected them to be right up there as well. And we're expecting Jake to be on to pastures new for season 12 as well, so it would have been nice for him to get a strong result. He's had a couple of podium finishes this year, but the consistency has been really his downfall. And Maserati now sort of the team being taken over by Stellantis in the long-term future, so likely it is the name above the door is going to change. It won't be Maserati going maybe into season 12, possibly into the Gen 4 era instead. As we look here at Nick de Vries, just getting right up to the wall through the exit of the Custom House chicane.
Good save.
You're used to going sideways, Katie. How did you rate that one?
Well, I did like that one, actually. His steering was in exactly the right position.
Max Günther also having a moment down into turn 16 and also just catching, who was that behind? It was Roland, wasn't it? here. No, it's Nato, I beg your pardon, in the Nissan. Just catching him unawares at the wrong time as well. Thankfully, Nato managing to avoid contact there, but just pushing the limits in the early stages of this third free practice session. Are the drivers out there? Going down towards the first corner. Again, a difficult day at the office for both the Neon McLaren drivers. At the end of it, we saw a 5-second penalty for Taylor Barnard after some contact in the race. Sam Bird was not classified at the end. I think he had some contact on the final lap by the sounds of things.
Yeah, he got a puncture.
Right, so yeah, he didn't cross the line, therefore wasn't classified. And that's a shame again for Sam Bird, another driver who were expected to be on to pastures new. Likely it is this weekend is probably going to be the end of his career as a race driver in Formula E, whether he pops up somewhere else as a development driver or wherever else it may be. We're not 100% sure at the moment, but we do wish him the very best of luck with his future endeavours. He's been a fantastic asset to this paddock and also to that Neil McLaren team as well, especially with Barnard coming into that team. He's really been able to help the youngster's career.
Yeah, I think Sam's role this season shouldn't be underestimated, although his individual performances haven't been super strong. Taking a driver with the talent of Taylor Barnard but guiding him into a completely new championship in Formula E, it's really important to have a teammate that's there to support you. And I think Sam, if you know him as a character, is a very supportive, friendly, welcoming person. And for sure, the dynamic at Team Neon McLaren has definitely been strong this season. I think that would have definitely helped to contribute to some strong results.
So a few moments we're seeing here then in practice. This is Robin Freins just going deep down at turn 16 as well. Drivers again just pushing the limits of grip. Should we expect the track to be a bit faster today, Katie? Given I know indoors is a bit difficult for it to rubber in because of the surface, but outdoors especially. I mean, you can see where the rubber has been laid down on the line. Yeah,
exactly. I think though I saw the sweepers going around last night, so they probably undid most of the work that the cars did yesterday. But obviously there was quite a lot of collisions. So they probably had some body parts to pick up for the cars that had the moments out on tracks that don't cause punches today. But yeah, definitely there'll be development throughout the day also as the track temperature rises. It will be getting faster, and as the drivers are warming up to it, they're all going to have been sharpening up overnight. I think there's some teams that really felt like they were missing out and off the pace. I'm specifically thinking about the Nissan of the factory Nissan team, but also with the McLaren team as well. They're going to have been working really hard last night, because I don't think they were up to their full potential. And there is a big championship on the line today for the teams. That's important prize money. It counts a lot towards the development next year and the budgets they're allowed. So yeah, massive day. Yeah,
in terms of the team's championship, Porsche leading Nissan by 37 points with 49 on the table. Here today. Sorry, 48 on the table, I beg your pardon, here today. So all to play for, an advantage with Porsche. Let's catch up with Jake Hughes and find out what's going on then. No laps for him so far in FP3.
Jake Hughes, we saw yesterday unfortunate retirement from the race, but my understanding, something different today that's stopping you being out on track.
Yeah, yesterday was mechanical. Unfortunately, got hit by another car, which caused me I broke my front right already in turn 1 on lap 1, which was obviously a bit frustrating. And then this is an electrical issue, completely separate. The car fired up okay this morning, and in the last check before FP3, we found an issue on the car, which is still ongoing, unfortunately.
Well, hopefully get you out on track soon and see what you can do. Thanks, Jake.
Yeah, hopefully. Thank you.
Poor old Jake Hughes, if he fell into a barrel of shoes and he would come out wearing socks at the moment. Just seems to have no luck at all. You can see him down there with the team, and well, if he's able to get some running, that'd be great. But I'll be honest, that car doesn't look like it's going anywhere in the immediate future.
I'm sure your puns are really helping him, Tom.
Through this difficult time. Oh, poor boy from Birmingham. Well, hopefully it's something for him to smile about a little bit later on if he gets a strong result in the E-Prix this afternoon. Let's have a look at Antonio Felix da Costa. A bit of a faltered challenge for him yesterday with the Tag Heuer Porsche team. Again, an opportunity for that team to, as you see him getting very sideways there through turn 14, to capitalise on the team's championship. But a difficult qualifying for da Costa, a difficult race as well. He was classified in 14th place, so no points on the board. The only 2 Porsche Power cars that did score points were Pascal Wehrlein in 3rd. Dennis came over the line in 5th place, but was eventually awarded a post-race penalty for contact with Oliver Rowland, as da Costa goes half a second quicker than Jean-Eric Vergne. We're now seeing times coming down into what we saw in FP2 yesterday. But yeah, only 2 Porsche Power cars eventually scoring points. Dennis classified in 8th position at the checkered flag. Katie, you saw the incident. We didn't see it during the race, actually, between Roland and Dennis. What did you make of it? I mean, from what we saw, it was essentially Dennis was on the inside coming into the outdoor section for the first time, and there was the slightest bit of contact, really.
It was. I think it's one of those unfortunate places on track where you have that elevation change, so the car goes light and you lose the grip. And it looked like as Dennis was passing, Roland was starting to turn into the corner, but then he didn't have time to turn out because he didn't have the grip to turn out, and basically the steering went light, as we're seeing. I think Lucas de Grassi going straight on at turn 1 as well. Yeah, this is one of the only places on track that drivers can really test their brakes.
Lucas, what about the chattering on the front tires? Did it become better?
No, it's still there, but the car becomes oversteer after the tires are in the window.
De Grassi not happy then on the team radio.
It was interesting what you mentioned earlier, Tom, about that surface change down at the runoff. We nearly had a repeat of what we saw from Stoffel van Dorn there for De Grassi. Yeah,
you can see him struggling to get the fronts of the car rotated going through that corner, so it looks like you just got to tiptoe your way around. You see a smattering of drivers now out on track, but most of them in the pit lane at this point, which is a great opportunity for the likes of Edo Mortara to get some clear track time. Traffic was a big problem in practice, and also in the group stages of qualifying as well, because there's so many blind and slow corners around this track, and you've got indoor, outdoor, you know, GPS maybe not as accurate as it could be. Sometimes drivers are getting caught out, catching, you know, others at the wrong time. We saw it, a great example of it yesterday, where Nick de Vries was on a 300 kilowatt lap, but the driver behind was on a 350 kilowatt lap. You know, they were both on fast laps, but you could see the pace difference was quite obvious, and ultimately it impeded, I think it was Nick Cassidy. Yeah, I think it was, if my memory serves me well. But yeah, it's one of those things with this track, because it is narrow, because it is tight. The drivers are also struggling for track position, because it's one of the shorter circuits on the calendar. It's just over 2 kilometers long. So with 22 cars on the grid, it does make finding track position, particularly in practice, even more tricky. No doubt about it. Here is Edo Mortara. Mahindra with reason to be optimistic, though, courtesy of the pace from Nick de Vries yesterday. Edo Mortara, he had a tricky one because he got involved in contact with Max Günther in the opening stages of the race. The only lap those two came together, which eliminated Günther from the race. Mortara would eventually be crossing over the line in 6th position at the checkered flag. But you get the impression this team haven't had a win since, I think it was London 2021, if memory serves me correctly here, Katie. You get the impression that they're on the precipice of that result, Mahindra.
Yes, yeah, their performance has increased so much this year. I think there was rumblings about it being their new engineer that came in. James Ross was saying earlier in the year, he predicted it. He said, I've worked with this guy. I know that within a few races, they're going to be back up there. And it was like a switch for the team. You know, multiple podiums this year. Nick obviously fastest in practice yesterday. And here we are, I think fastest lap that we've seen so far yet this weekend has just been set by Mortara.
Sorry, I thought he was going to go straight into the barrier there. He was so deep over the curb into the custom house chicane. Always looked like he was a bit unsighted by Mortara coming down that back straight, and it just upset his rhythm. Maybe he missed the braking point by a few metres. Thankfully, he managed to keep it out of harm's way, but that was about as close for comfort as you want to be getting. Yeah, you do not want to have a big crash in practice, because the turnaround time for qualifying isn't particularly long, so that would have been a real challenge from Mahindra, who actually, just looking from the results yesterday, they scored the same amount of points as Jaguar. They were highest points accrued within the team's fight yesterday, with a 2nd and 6th place. So the gap to 4th in the team's standings to Penske's only 10 points now, Tom. Yeah, not far there at all, and a great opportunity for them. Let's have another look at what happened here for Nick de Vries. You see he's deep into the first corner. That sends him over to the big, taller concrete curb on the inside through turn 11 at the custom house chicane. It was interesting. He obviously had braked late, but it was more losing the rear that seemed to throw him offline there. It wasn't like what we usually see, which is too much curve on the right-hander, which then puts you out of position for the left-hander. He generally was just trying to roll so much speed through the apex of that right. He lost the rear, and it just put him very wide and offline.
It's exactly what Mitch was saying on his analysis with you yesterday at the E-pad, wasn't it? That's the one corner where you feel like you always under-brake, and then you try and push it a bit further, but then you absolutely screw up the next 2 corners if you get that wrong. So that's one of those annoying corners as the driver. You either feel like you've overdone it or you've underdone it. Getting that sweet spot in the middle, I think, rarely happens.
Yeah, thankfully for Nick de Vries, as we said, keeping out the barrier, currently 4th quickest, with his teammate Mortara top of the pile at the moment. Just looking briefly at Norman Nato there inside the Nissan garage. Special livery on that car this weekend. They're promoting the new Nissan Leaf as we ride on board here with Nick Cassidy down to the first corner. We thought that the opening lap would be pretty dramatic. We had contact going out of turn 2, and then we had contact coming out of turn 5 here as well. It was a pretty dramatic first lap, which saw the safety car being deployed. Well, we saw the Mahindra, sorry, the Nissan, I beg your pardon, of Norman Nato a few moments ago. Let's get down and catch up with the team principal of that outfit, Tommaso Volpe. Of course, Nissan fighting for first in the Teams Championship. They're going to catch up with the team principal of that outfit, Tommaso Volpe. Of course, Nissan fighting for first in the Teams Championship. They're currently 37 points adrift with one race remaining this year.
Thank you, Tom. Yes, Tommaso, celebrations guaranteed later on with Oliver Rowland and the driver's title crowning. But when it comes to the teams, how do you fancy your chances today?
Well, it's going to be tough, but of course we will try. But after the result yesterday and the fact that our package doesn't seem to be particularly fast here, it's going to be difficult.
What lessons can you take from yesterday into today in terms of race performance? Yes, there's no pit stop with a pit boost, but there was a lot that we learned from yesterday.
That we need to take care of more than 2 Porsche cars on track.
Okay, thanks, Tommaso.
Very short and to the point there for Tommaso Volpe. Yeah, he's not wrong. Porsche have got a good alliance here this weekend. You've got the 2 Cupra Chiros, which are not showing bad pace. You've got the Andrettis, and of course, you've got the factory Porsches as well. And to be honest, Nissan have not looked particularly comfortable at any points this weekend. None of the cars made it through into the dual stages of qualifying yesterday for the first time in, I can't remember how long, really. And even in the race yesterday, again, Rowland didn't really make too much of an impression. No points for him yesterday. And in terms of the other drivers, Sam Bird, of course, we saw got a DNF. Barnard picked up a penalty for his trouble. Nato was the only Nissan Power car that scored 2 points.
Oliver Rowland also won here last year, so it's not like they've never performed on this track. I think they're just really struggling to get it in the window this year. But I was thinking they might have found a bit more pace overnight, to be honest with you. That's one thing that I think they're very good at, is looking at the data. Oliver Rowland especially is such a good engineer in his own right. Maybe we'll see some fast laps coming through. I think 1.6 is quite far back. I don't think we've seen any real flyers from him yet, so I would expect that to come down quite a lot before the end of the session. Yeah,
qualifying's the big talking point here, isn't it, as well? We know. I mean, Norman Nato, he started the race down in 16th on the grid and was, again, classified in 9th. That was helped by penalties dropping a few drivers down, but nonetheless, again, good ascension through the field for him. Billy, why do you think it is that Nissan have not got the pace that we saw here last year? Do you think it's the fact that they're struggling, or do you think everyone else has made a step forward?
I think from just speaking to a few of the teams and drivers around the paddock that run this Nissan powertrain, I think the drivability of this Nissan is potentially a bit of an issue which is presented here this weekend. I think there's a lot of, you had to use a lot of curbs around this circuit. It's narrow, it's bumpy. We've obviously seen in FP1 De Grassi's car cutting out over the bumps actually on a couple of occasions and having issues there. And I think compared to the other drivetrains, it seems to be the slight downfall is that the drivability on a bumpy, tricky circuit like this, it doesn't bode well for Nissan. So they need to find a way to balance that with the setup of their car mechanically to make it, compliant over those curbs so they can find that extra bit of performance.
And against all the odds, looks like we're going to be going for an unchanged driver lineup according to reports in the press this week at Nissan for season 12, which is good news for this man here, Norman Nato. I mean, again, not wishing to do him a disservice. He has had a tricky season with a lot of bad luck and some penalties have not been thrown his way. But on the other side, the lion's share of the points have been scored at that team by Oliver Rowland this season. So, again, Norman Nato will be looking to try and end this weekend on a high and hopefully bounce back at the start of season 12 with a strong start to the year.
Yeah, he definitely needs to find some performance because as a racing driver, when you look to the other side of the garages, we see him get a little bit airborne over those bumps there. You look to the other side of the garage and you see what Oliver Rowland's done this year. He knows that potentially if he'd been delivering strong performances, he could have been in a championship fight. And there's no one more on this grid than the likes of a Norman Nato and all the drivers, really, that they want to become world champion. That's why you start out in racing. So if the opportunity's there, if you've got a package that is clearly capable of that, so you see David Beckman going deep into 10 and 11 chicane, very deep. In fact,
Had a lot of speed in that.
Didn't ever look like that was going to get stopped, but luckily no damage to that car, and he's had to do a little bit of a 3-point turn and back out of there.
Yeah, it's the pedal in the middle, David, that we need to use to slow down. Just a bit too much speed into there, and as you say, unfortunately these cars have got the steering lock of a QE2 ship, haven't they, unfortunately, so you can't get them rotating quite so easily.
Can't lie, Tom, I've never been behind the wheel of a ship, so I'll leave that one to you.
If I did it, would be like Uncle Albert. I'd be sunk within 20 feet, I reckon, to be honest. But David Beckman, currently 8th quickest at the moment in this session in the Cupra Kiro. So good pace for him so far, with just over 13 minutes left on the clock. You can see inside the Tag Heuer Porsche garage here for Pascal Wehrlein, the outgoing world champion. Now, just doing a couple of setup changes on that car, changing over a set of tyres as well. We're looking here at Nico Müller, another Porsche-powered car, as he makes his way through turn 9. His race actually ended up in the barrier yesterday after contact with Sebastian Buemi in the latter stages, which removed him from a possible point-scoring opportunity. It's also handed Sebastian Buemi a 5-place grid penalty for that collision here this afternoon as well. There's actually 2 penalties to mention, Dan Tickton being the other driver who's picked up a 5-place grid penalty for that contact that we saw, which spun Mitch Evans round at the final sector. Along with the grid penalties, there were also about 5 or 6 different time penalties at the end of that race as well. It seemed like everybody was picking them up. Yeah, there was quite a few penalties, and I think grid penalties around this circuit, so for the likes of a Dan Tickton, that's even more costly, because obviously his race came to a conclusion when he made a mistake and ended up in the barrier himself, but then to have that compounded with having a 5-place grid penalty, he's going to definitely, for me, need to make it far into the duels to put himself in contention for a potential race victory, having that grid place penalty to deal with. Jake Dennis just improves, goes to second fastest, 0.003 of a second adrift of Eduardo Mortares. The Andretti looking quite nice out there at the moment. Spoke to Jake on the grid yesterday, said what's going to happen for this race. He said, to be honest, I've got no clue. We just got to wait and see what the guys at the front do, and we can try and work our strategy out from there. Again, it would have worked out quite nicely for him if it wasn't for that 5-second penalty that he had for contact with Oliver Rowland in the race. Meanwhile, we're on board here with Dan Tickton, looking to try and bounce back after ending his race in the barrier yesterday, and bounce back he does indeed by going to the top of the order with a 1:07.270. Yeah, that's the second fastest lap we've seen all weekend. The fastest just being what Mitch Evans was able to produce to take pole position yesterday in the final of qualifying. So the track is definitely there. It's definitely rubbered in. The grip has still been there overnight, and potentially we might dip into the 1:06 if everything comes together.
I was just listening on his team radio a minute before he did that, and he was talking about trying to get the tyres in the window. He was saying he was going to do a 300 lap to try and get a bit more temperature in before he went for 350, but he just said he had no grip before that. So it seems like from the team radios this morning, that window's a bit small. Quite frustrated drivers out there at the minute.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Another frustrated driver will be Jake Hughes, who we just saw. No running on the board for the boy from Birmingham, unfortunately, in this session by the looks of things. On board here with Dan Tickton, making his way through turn 16. This is again another area where it almost ends up looking like Piccadilly Circus at rush hour in the group stages of qualifying, and also somewhat in free practice as well. It really concertinas up as the drivers try to find that crucial track position. You can see the track performance map on the right-hand side there. Tickton looking pretty strong in the first and the final sector here.
Yeah, first, I think he was strong in all 3 sectors, Tom, looking at the lap time. I mean, we're talking sector 2, where the track performance graphic says he, is less strong. We're talking a matter of hundredths of a second, so we'll cut him some slack.
Yeah, very impressive stuff there from Dan Tickton. We know that Cupra Kiro is pretty handy in the slower speed corners. If you look back to Monaco, he was on for promising results in qualifying on the Sunday, I believe it was, when we were in wet conditions. And unfortunately for him, the car ended up going out with 300 kilowatts rather than 350. So that put pay to a possible opportunity to go into the final as we look at Taylor Barnard making his way through. Tell you what, the rejoin here on attack mode, it's so tight. I mean, we saw this last year, and we saw it exemplified yesterday as well, where some drivers are coming out of it, and obviously the natural racing line sort of feeds into that as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. Definitely gets tricky there to take that attack mode to come out and to not lose track position. You see Taylor Barnard almost Dan Ticktum-esque sliding his way into the pit lane there.
Well, just under 10 minutes left of the session. The two takeaway Porsches, 4th and 5th, Da Costa in front of Pascal Wehrlein. Porsche 37 points in front of Nissan in the team's championship here going into the last race of the season. And Saunders is down in the pit lane, catching up with their team principal, Florian Modlinger.
Thank you, Tom. Yeah, Florian, Pascal's podium yesterday really helping the cause and getting that team's championship sewn up.
Yeah, yesterday was a good job done and a step forward, very important step forward in both championships, increasing the lead. But another race day to go, and today it counts again.
Speaking to Tommaso a little while ago, he said that yesterday felt like there was more than 2 Porsches to contend with. Is that part of the plan today as well, utilise all the Porsche-powered cars to help the cause?
No, first of all, we have to look each team on their own championship. We as manufacturer on the manufacturer championship, and it's important for all Porsche to collect as many points as possible, and that's also the target for today.
Thanks, Florian.
Thank you.
Afford a build lap to wake up the surface before the 300. Your call.
So just looking there at the run plan for Pascal Wehrlein and Florian Modlinger, who we heard from a few moments ago in pit lane, saying that the plan isn't to involve the other Porsche cars. I'll believe that when I see it. I have to be honest, if you've got another 4 sort of in your back pocket, you're not going to discount them, shall we say.
Interesting to hear Pascal's radio communications with his engineer, because we've got Katie, who is our spy in the comms box, who's checking out all the team radio and obviously taking a leaf out of the Cooper Kiro team, Dan Ticktum, because that's what he did, that 300 lap.
Well, it's funny because I think that they all actually have access through the app to the different team radios, and they have someone sat within their team listening to the other teams to see what's going on and trying to relay it.
Look on board here with Mitch Evans as we come out into the daylight. This is out of turn 5, down the hill into 6, 7, and then turn 8. This is where the race came to an end for Dan Ticktum. He just locked up, sending it through on the inside, straight to the scene of the crash.
Mitch Evans fastest in the first sector, so picking up Tom where he left off yesterday with that pole position. A little bit of rear instability there down into 10 and 11. Now he goes through 12 and 13. Neat and tidy on the exit, maybe leaving a tiny bit of margin, or more margin, should we say, than some of the other competitors that we've seen coming through there, having some sideways moments. Screen in the middle sector, so he's still on for an absolutely cracking lap here, Mitch Evans.
Yeah, you can see how much it bottlenecks up in that middle sector where the circuit goes from wide to narrow, back to wide again. In this final sector, we come through lots of lock on the car into turn 19 and likewise into turn 20. But the car looks nice and compliant, and it sends Mitch Evans to the top of the timing sheet. Nearly 5/100ths quicker than Dan Ticktum. The Jaguars looking pretty handy here. They've won the last 5 races, either as the factory team or as powertrain providers to Envision at this circuit. So you'd have to say it's hard to bet against them given the performances that we've seen. But there are some other teams that are doing quite well. Porsche-powered cars not looking too bad. The Mahindra's looking pretty good. In fact, the only team that seems to really be struggling are the Nissan-powered cars this weekend.
Yeah, for sure. They're still struggling with the balance of that car, as we look like Degrassi almost touched the wall there, it looked like. So, yeah, he's really pushing on this lap. But, yeah, Mitch Evans, I think Dan Ticktum, Mortara, you see all the drivers at the top end of the field here. I think for me what's going to be critical is just delivering those laps when the pressure's on in qualifying, because it's all right doing it in practice now. We've got a long session, a lot of time to tweak and speak to your engineer, but with the margins being so tight, it's all going to come down to who can do it when it counts.
And speaking of qualifying as well, Casey, 5 minutes to go for the end of this session. I imagine we're probably going to start seeing qualifying sims coming in now. It's only an hour and a half to go once the session concludes, but we get into the group stages.
Yeah, for sure. We always see the lap times come down at the end of the session, but I think also it's difficult to then replicate the pace they've had here when the tyres have got cold and then you go straight out to qualifying. I mean, they've been running for 40 minutes now, so they know exactly the window that the tyres are in, and that was the frustration that we saw for Nick Cassidy yesterday when he got through into the duels, and then I think he made a comment about his tyres going in an ice bucket rather than being kept warm by the team. He was really frustrated. And it just shows you on a low grip surface like this, that really counts. You can't just make that grip out through driving, because if it's not there, it's not there. And every time you're going sideways, even though it looks cool for us, it's it's not getting the power in the right direction that you want to go.
Yeah, a lot of emphasis on qualifying, as we said, in terms of the grid position for this weekend, but also in terms of pole position as well. 3 points on offer for that one, which could be make or break, depending on what happens in the teams and the Manufacturers' Championship. As I've said a couple of times, 37 points is the gap between Porsche and Nissan at the top of the table. In terms of the Manufacturers' Championship, you've got Porsche, who are on 361 points, Nissan, who are on 338. So, what's that, 23 points, isn't it, the gap between those two? So, again, still all to play for, still very, very tight margins. The Manufacturers' Trophy, newly introduced in Formula E, and we'll see who is going to be taking that crown in Season 11. On board here with Pascal Wehrlein, the second sector. He goes personal best, just gets a little bit of traffic in his way down at turn 16.
The first sector on this lap from Pascal Wehrlein, it was mighty, a 23.8 and a low 23.8, and we've barely seen drivers sneak in sub-24 in that first part of the lap, so that's where his advantage has been at the start of this lap, and he's carried it all the way through that couple of tenth margin. 107.045, that's the fastest lap of the entire weekend.
Fantastic job from Pascal Wehrlein to take the fastest lap of the weekend then here for the Tag Heuer Porsche team. Florian Modlinger not looking best pleased at something or other on the screen at the moment. Not quite sure what that's in relation to, but I'm sure we'll find out a little bit later on. Just going back to Pascal Wehrlein, this is a circuit that he goes at particularly well. Last 3 occasions he's finished on the podium. Once last year he won here as well in the opening race of the weekend. So expect a strong performance then from the reigning world champion. De Vries in a full attack mode lap. You can see that with the magenta lights illuminating the car in practice. But by the way, when we get into race conditions, this being the Fantastic 4 E3, it does mean that the attack mode lights will go from nothing. There'll be no lights on the car in normal power mode, and they'll go to blue when they're in attack mode, just making things a bit confusing as De Vries runs it on down to the custom house chicane. So that's the lap time that's got away from the Dutchman. He had to come to a complete stop there, and that's going to compromise Dan Ticktum as well. And well, I don't think he did come to a stop. Ticktum pretty frustrated with that one.
Yeah, well, I mean, you have to come to a stop there, Tom, for that reason, because Nick De Vries there has just come out onto the circuit as Dan Ticktum is carrying much more speed through that chicane, having not gone deep, and that's ruined effectively Dan Ticktum's lap, and he was on a personal best in the first part of the lap, so you can see why there's frustration there.
Yeah, and let's be honest, he should have had team radio communicating with him there, shouldn't he? Katie's going to have a listen to some team radio, I think, for Dan Ticktum and for Nick De Vries, and find out what the assessment is there. But Ticktum, as we heard, not best pleased with that one at all, as we saw rather, not best pleased with that one, unsurprisingly so. De Vries just rejoining onto the circuit, wrong place, wrong time for Ticktum, and it compromised what could have been a potentially promising lap for the Briton, who's currently sits third fastest, just 0.2 of a second shy of the quickest time with a couple of minutes remaining.
Yeah, Porsche definitely looking strong if you look at the leaderboard. You've got Pascal Wehrlein first, Dan Ticktum in third, Jake Dennis in fifth, and De Coster in sixth. So 4 of the top 6 are Porsche powertrain cars.
Yeah, Oliver Rowland down there in 19th position, by the way. That's bookended by the 2 Neon McLarens, Bird and Barnard in 20th and 21st place, respectively. Incidentally, they are one of only 3 drivers that are in the pit lane. I suppose you could argue that Hughes is also in the pit lane, but he's never gone out of it so far. So, anyway, Van Dorn in the other Maserati, having much better fortunes than his teammate as he comes out the final corner and goes to third quickest. So the Stellantis-powered cars having a little bit of pace as we look at De Coster. A bit of a snap of oversteer going into turn 10 there. And just getting caught behind the DS Penske there of Jean-Eric Verne, very briefly. So brilliant watching it on board going through 14, 15 and into turn 16, because you're threading the eye of a needle. The car just looks like it's constantly bucking and weaving all over the place.
Yeah, it's moving around a lot in that section of the circuit, so it's definitely challenging for the drivers, but we want to see that. We want a circuit that challenges these drivers. We've got some of the best drivers in the world, and we don't want them to have it too easy, do we?
No doubt that's it at all. So last few seconds then left of this session. Mitch Evans, personal best in the first sector. What's it going to be like then for sector 2 in the Jaguar TCS racing car? He's going to be out for vengeance and to end what has been a pretty challenging season. The season really of 2 halves for Mitch Evans on a high. Fastest overall in sector 2. And look at the car moving around as he comes in towards turn 16. Out of it now he goes, and in towards turns 19 and 20, into the Excel Centre, and this could be a time which betters that set by Pascal Wehrlein and sets the quickest lap time of the weekend. Over the line we go, and Mitch Evans does it by 6/100ths of a second. The first driver into the 1-minute 6s. That is an absolute stonker for Mitch Evans as he takes the checkered flag and takes the top spots. Nato also improving there, up into 5th fastest in the Nissan, giving that team something to smile about this weekend.
It's definitely more promising. And one thing to consider going into qualifying, though, is all of these laps at the minute are happening in 350 kilowatts in the group stages of qualifying, which are the critical stages to get through to the latter part. It's in 300 kilowatts, so we see some traffic and some contact there.
That was de Grassi into the back of Max Günther into the final corner. So you can see that building himself up there is Günther for a lap, and, well, I think the steward, you can hear him on team radio. Sorry if you had some fruity language there, but de Grassi clearly not happy with that. Well, if we do get the team radio, it will be sassy de Grassi, I'm sure, after that one, because, yeah, not best pleased will the Brazilian driver be, unsurprisingly so. I can't imagine that Max Günther is exactly overly enamoured after that either. Either way, free pressure 3 then does come to a slightly dramatic conclusion with a bit of contact there between de Grassi and Günther in the last few seconds of that session. But it is Mitch Evans who is best of the lot. Fantastic lap time there from the Jaguar driver right at the very end, his final flying lap of the session, and it gives them reason to be optimistic going into qualifying in an hour and a half's time. Pascal Wehrlein second, and also Stoffel van Dorn in third. So 3 different powertrains inside the top 3, which is good news for us because we don't know exactly what it's going to look like when we go into qualifying. Dan Ticktum in 4th and Nato in P5.
What an idiot, man.
Yeah, well, pretty short and to the point there for Lucas de Grassi.
Yeah, that's one side of the story.
Yeah, I want to see what was going on there, because it looked, from what we saw, like Günther was just on a build lap, really. He was slow through the final couple of corners. Don't think he was deliberately impeding de Grassi, just trying to find a bit of clear track to start his lap.
It's the problems with this circuit that we were mentioning all throughout that session, how track position is hard to come by. If you're setting up a lap, particularly in that last corner compared to a car on a push lap, the lines are slightly different. You take a wider entry to that corner, you V off the exit to get that good run onto the start-finish straight, and sometimes those mistakes and those errors can happen, but it's up to not only the drivers but the teams to communicate effectively with their drivers to get them the right gaps to start their laps, and a gap so they don't get into traffic at the end of their laps like de Grassi just had.
As we mentioned earlier on, Katie, good lap at the end there for Norman Nato, P5 for him at the checkered flag, but 3 Nissan power cars, Roland, Bird and Barnard, down in 19th, 20th and 21st.
Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, I think that would be the fastest lap that a Nissan power car has done this weekend so far. So I'm sure they're going to be studying his lap there and taking what they can and putting it across to Oliver's car and Oliver's driving style as well, if they share that information with the team. It's an important weekend for him, though. We've spoken a lot about his performance, and I think there has been elements of this season where he has showed a lot of potential, and he should have had a few podiums that have. Obviously, we have Miami with the penalty, technical issues in other races as well where he did show performance. So I think Nissan have probably seen that and are thinking of the long game with him and ironing out a few issues to hopefully get him some big points next year.
You can hear Max Günther in the pit box at the end of that session for DS Penske. He was classified in 12th position. Contact at the rear, though, we saw between himself and de Grassi. And you'll probably imagine there's a bit of rear diffuser damage on that. And in fact, there's a bit of Lola Yamaha wrapped on the rear diffuser as well, part of the front wing assembly that sits on the back of that machine, just to show you exactly what happened. Well, not the end that either of those two drivers would have wanted, and audible frustration from de Grassi on the team radio as well. And there is the front wing damage that we can see for Lucas de Grassi. I'm sure a bit of a debrief will be going on inside the box. Let's get confirmation, though, of the results at the end of free practice 3 for the Marble Fantastic Four London E-Prix. Mitch Evans is at the top of the order, the first driver into the 1-minute 6s ahead of qualifying later on this morning. Pascal Wehrlein in P2, and Stoffel van Dorn for Maserati pops it into P3 ahead of Dan Ticktum and Norman Nato, the class of the Nissan field, in P5. He was easily the best performer with that powertrain. Edo Mortara, then Dennis, Da Costa, Cassidy and Buemi completing the top 10. Just outside of it, you can see a smorgasbord, 4 British drivers of Rowland, Bird, Barnard and Hughes all down there at the bottom of the pile. Hughes, of course, didn't get out in that session owing to an electrical problem. Fingers crossed that team were able to get that fixed and sorted in time for qualifying here later on today. But cause for concern there for the Nissan Power Cars, 3 cars on the fringes of the top 20 and 1.6 to 2 seconds respectively off the pace.
The steering heavier right than left, was it still the case throughout? Got worse or better?
Yeah, it is. Generally the rack is just a bit heavier than it is normally, but it's still heavier turning right than it is left, yeah.
Okay, copy. Check that.
What do you think that could be down to there, Billy?
To be honest, Tom, not too sure on that one. It's peculiar to have a different side to side, so I think the engineer didn't exactly sound like reassured that they had the answers. They just said they're going to look into it, so hopefully, just for Dan's sake, they can get it turned around in time for qualifying.
I would say that this is a track where there's only a few left-hand corners, so maybe his arm's just getting a bit tired for the right hand.
I had to say, maybe he's just been working his arms out a little bit differently. He needs to balance it out in the gym or something.
Big race day yesterday.
Couple of 15s on or something like that on the right one. Yeah, De Grassi there, body language paints a picture as we look at the drivers in the weighbridge. Dan Ticktum, P4 for the Briton. He'll be out for revenge here this afternoon, and let's be honest, he would very much welcome that result. A lot of family for him and friends here this weekend being the home round for him. Antonio Felix Da Costa, P8 in the Tank Oil Porsche. That's a bit more like it for Da Costa inside the top 10. Hopefully he can continue that performance going into qualifying. In terms of the gap, it's 0.4 of a second separating the top 8 drivers and only half a second separating the top 10. So very fine margins as we're used to seeing, especially around a lap as short as this one, this circuit only being 2 kilometres long. But if Da Costa can get himself into the group stages, out of the group stages rather, into the dual stages of qualifying, that'll be a very welcome result there for Tank Oil Porsche.
Yeah, Porsche definitely needs 2 drivers up the sharp end of the field for the team's championship. It is very much in their favour with the way it stands right now, but having 2 drivers in qualifying that put in strong performances will definitely make them feel more reassured going into the race.
So Evans has jumped out the car, but he hasn't yet gone to the FIA weighbridge, we're understanding. He hasn't gone down to scrutineering to get himself weighed. Not quite sure what that's all about. Sure, it's probably not too much to read into, but sure we'll pop down there before too long. Anyway, let's look then at some highlights at the end of free practice 3. Relatively calm affair out on track for the final free practice session. Not at the start of it though for Stoffel van Dorn. He had a run-off down at turn 1 and then was met with a face full of barrier after going onto the slippery concrete in the run-off area.
Yeah, that run-off area definitely not providing much grip, as we see one of the Envisions there going deep into attack mode territory and actually missing that. Then we see another of the Lola Yamaha Apt cars, De Grassi, replicating what we saw from Stoffel van Dorn, but just not quite making it all the way into the barrier.
No, we saw some good performances from the Tag Heuer Porsche. In fact, all of the Porsche Power cars looking pretty handy so far here this weekend. The lowest of the lot would have been David Beckman down in 16th position. Muller up in 13th, Costa in 8th position. Dennis was up there inside the top 7 as well.
Speaking of David Beckman, this was him going deep into the 10-11 chicane, having to do a bit of a 3-point turn to get that one back out on the circuit.
Yeah, thankfully for him, he managed to avoid the barrier. It wasn't the only driver that came to blows there. We saw this dramatic moment for Nick de Vries. He went off down here and then rejoined right in front of Dan Ticktum. Ticktum was most displeased by that, given the body language that we saw from the British driver inside the cockpit thereafter. But we haven't seen anything that's saying it's under investigation, so we'll wait and see what happens though. Either way, Mitch Evans was the fastest driver at the end of FP3, a 106.984 for the Kiwi. So Jaguar continuing where they left off here yesterday afternoon. So in terms of how it works out today, for qualifying we kick off at 12:20 local time, so an hour and a half or so, and we'll get the final qualifying session underway. The E3 is going to be on the way at 5 p.m. this afternoon, and it's all to play for. Teams and manufacturers' titles to be decided, and we've got 3 different powertrains inside the top 3 at the end of the third free practice session of the weekend as well. It's going to be an absolute cracker. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you for qualifying very soon.